The July storm unleashed heavy raindrops against the windshield of Marcus Vance's pickup truck. The wipers worked at full capacity, yet they still couldn't wash away the grayness of the night sky. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tightly, his hands heavily calloused after 3 continuous weeks of mapping rescue terrain in the Rockies. He had been driving for 12 hours straight with only one purpose in mind: to make it back in time for his son Leo's 9th birthday. On the passenger seat rested a carefully wrapped large box. Inside was a specialized telescope. Leo was a unique boy. He didn't like football or loud, boisterous games. Leo possessed a rich inner world. He was highly sensitive to loud noises, yet he could sit for hours drawing flocks of migrating birds or stargazing. Marcus knew his job as a wilderness search and rescue SAR expert kept him away from home far too often. This telescope was an apology, as well as a promise that he would dedicate this entire summer to his son. The dashboard clock read 8:00 p.m. as he pulled into the family driveway. But instead of the warm, golden glow of lights and the sweet smell of cake, he was greeted by a dark, cold void. Elena's SUV was missing. Not a single light was on. The first pang of unease crept into Marcus's chest. He opened the door and stepped inside. "Elena, Leo, I'm home." A thick, suffocating silence answered him. Marcus flicked on the living room lights. The house was flawlessly clean, polished, and so impeccably tidy it felt soulless. It was far too perfect for a family with a 9-year-old. Not a single Lego brick on the rug, no boxes of crayons, or Leo's bird drawings on the coffee table. Elena's obsessive tidiness always made the house feel more like an interior design magazine cover than a home. On the marble kitchen island, a white sticky note was placed neatly beneath a vase. Elena's handwriting was as sharp and cold as she was. "Marcus, I took Leo to the Sterling Pathway camp with my dad. The boy is getting weaker and more useless by the day. He needs to learn how to be a real man, not a coward who cowers in a corner at the slightest noise. Don't look for us. We'll be back this weekend." Marcus stood frozen, the paper trembling in his hand. Sterling Pathway. It was the educational conglomerate run by his father-in-law, former Colonel Arthur Sterling. On the surface, it was a legitimate organization within the troubled teen industry, specializing in wilderness therapy programs. But Marcus knew Arthur's true nature all too well. The man was an iron-fisted disciplinarian who genuinely believed that violence and harshness could shatter any personality and recast it into a perfect mold. Leo was only 9 years old. The boy had phonophobia, so sensitive he could burst into tears just seeing a baby bird fall from its nest. A military-style boot camp wasn't education for Leo. It was a sentence of torture. Memories of the last argument before his business trip flooded Marcus's mind. Elena had thrown Leo's sketchbook into the trash, simply because the boy accidentally dripped a drop of watercolor onto the oak floor. "He's a defective product, Marcus," she had hissed. "Are you raising a son or a crybaby daughter?" Marcus had held Leo tightly then, as the boy covered his ears, cowering and trembling. He thought his stern warning that day had put an end to Elena's intentions of sending Leo to camp. He was wrong. Elena's obsession with a perfect child had completely eclipsed her maternal instincts. There was no time to panic. Every skill of a search and rescue SAR expert immediately activated. Marcus's only advantage was knowing exactly where Arthur's private, secluded camp was located. 2 years ago, the state government had hired him to map the national forest adjacent to Arthur's property. It was a remote, treacherous area with absolutely no cell reception. Marcus turned around, abandoning his suitcase of clothes and grabbing only the specialized tactical backpack he always kept in his truck. Inside were a high-intensity flashlight, a multi-tool, bolt cutters, a medical first aid kit, thermal blankets, and a coil of climbing rope. He started the engine, and the pickup truck roared into the night, tearing through the torrential rain. The storm seemed to growl in unison with the suppressed rage in the father's chest. After more than 2 hours of driving on slippery highways, Marcus turned onto a winding, muddy trail deep into the woods owned by Sterling Pathway. The terrain grew steadily worse, the darkness of ancient pines swallowing his headlights. About a mile from the camp, Marcus pulled into a thick grove of trees and killed the engine. He couldn't drive straight in. Men like Arthur always had cameras or sensors at the main gate. He had to infiltrate like a ghost. Marcus threw on his black raincoat, strapped on his backpack, and double-checked the survival knife sheathed at his hip. The freezing forest rain lashed at his face, but his blood was boiling. He stepped into the woods, moving silently precisely, blending into the night. He was no longer a deceived husband, nor just a worried father. Tonight, he was a hunter, and his only target was bringing his little boy home. The dense forests of the Pacific Northwest had never been an obstacle for Marcus. His eyes were accustomed to spotting the faintest tracks of lost hikers. Now, amidst the blinding downpour, he wove through the ancient trunks, his tactical boots landing on the damp leaf litter, without a single rustle. The storm masked his presence perfectly. After 20 minutes of approach, the central camp revealed itself under a flash of lightning. It was a clearing surrounded by 3 log cabins and a corrugated tin shed. There were no watchtowers, no patrolling guards. Arthur Sterling was far too confident in the remoteness of the location, and perhaps he never expected anyone to come looking. Arthur's expensive, mud-splattered pickup was parked heavily in front of the main cabin's porch. Marcus lowered his center of gravity, moving behind a row of empty barrels. He was about to advance toward the main house when a tiny sound, nearly swallowed by the rolling thunder, stopped him dead in his tracks. It wasn't a cry. It was the sound of teeth chattering violently together, the sound of a creature shivering at the absolute edge of its core temperature. Marcus followed the sound toward an ancient oak tree standing far from the cabins. When the beam of his red-filtered flashlight, used to reduce glare, swept across the scene, the father's heart within Marcus felt as if it had been crushed, ceasing to beat in his chest. Leo. His son was curled into a ball at the base of the tree. The ground beneath the boy had turned into a muddy puddle. Leo was wearing nothing but thin shorts, no shirt, no shoes. The 9-year-old's pale skin was riddled with hundreds of swollen mosquito bites and bleeding scratches. One end of a rusted iron chain was wrapped around the tree trunk, the other linked directly to steel cuffs fastened tightly around the boy's frail ankle, leaving horrific purple bruises. Leo, oh God, Leo! Marcus rushed forward, tossing the flashlight aside. He dropped to his knees in the mud, throwing his arms out to embrace the tiny, violently shaking body. But Leo's reaction pierced Marcus's soul like a dagger. Upon feeling his father's warmth and embrace, instead of bursting into relieved tears, Leo flinched violently. The boy cowered, using his last bit of strength to press his back flush against the oak tree, his wide eyes brimming with sheer, unadulterated terror. He bit his lower lip so hard it bled, absolutely refusing to let a single sob escape. Don't touch me," Leo whispered, his voice hoarse and broken from the cold. "I'm dirty," Grandpa said. "Dirty and crybaby boys don't deserve to be loved." "I won't cry. Please don't punish me, Dad. I'm sorry." The fury within Marcus flared into a dark, consuming inferno, but he instantly swallowed it back down, forcing his voice to be gentle, profoundly calm. He knew his son's nervous system was in a state of extreme panic from severe psychological abuse. "No, Leo. Listen to me." Marcus pulled out his multi-tool, carefully wedging the bolt cutters against the shackle's lock. "Grandpa is wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. I am here. No one is allowed to hurt you ever again." Snap! The lock gave way. Marcus didn't wait for Leo to react further. He tore off his waterproof, insulated jacket, wrapped it tightly around his son's freezing body, and pulled the boy into a fierce embrace. The smell of mud sweat and Leo's sheer terror filled Marcus's senses. Only then did Leo's tiny, trembling hand weakly grip the hem of his father's shirt. "Dad," Leo whispered, his breath faint. "In the shed. There's a girl. She can't talk." The protective instinct urged Marcus to get Leo away immediately, but the responsibility of a man who had worn the SAR uniform wouldn't let him leave another victim behind. Carrying Leo on his back, he moved swiftly out of the clearing, placing his son in the cabin of his pickup, blasting the heat, and wrapping him in thermal blankets. "Lock the doors. I'll be right back." Marcus returned to the clearing, heading straight for the locked tin shed. Instead of using the cutters, he used a small pry bar to quietly break the hinges, avoiding any sharp metal noises. The stench of urine, mold, and despair hit him in the face. In the darkest corner, huddled on the cold concrete floor, was a girl of about 11. She was skin and bones, her eyes hollow, clutching a torn, suspiciously stained men's fleece jacket tightly to her chest. When Marcus approached, she didn't scream. She only opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Selective mutism, the result of psychological trauma beyond endurance. "I'm Leo's dad. I'm here to take you both home," Marcus whispered, extending a hand. His steady gaze and deep, warm voice seemed to soothe her. The girl nodded, clutching the torn jacket, someone's keepsake, and obediently let Marcus pick her up. Her name was Mia. After getting Mia to the truck with Leo, Marcus knew he couldn't just leave. He needed evidence. They had institutionalized this torture, and if he only took the kids, Arthur would use the law to steal them back. Marcus approached the main log cabin. The door was unlocked. Arthur Sterling, carrying the arrogance of a man who believed himself to hold absolute power, was sleeping soundly on a plush bed, reeking of whiskey. Marcus slipped through the living room, heading straight to the desk. The glow of a sleeping computer monitor cast a dim light. Using basic intelligence-gathering techniques, Marcus quickly plugged in his portable hard drive, copying the entire folder labeled Sterling Pathway Client Files. He opened the physical filing cabinet next to the desk. A file bearing the name Leo Vance caught his eye. Marcus flipped it open. It was a 60-day medical care and guardianship authorization contract. His eyes grew bloodshot as he saw his own signature sitting squarely at the bottom of the page. Elena had forged his signature. She had legally authorized Arthur to use forceful behavioral control and solitary confinement on their own flesh and blood. Beneath the contract lay a digital voice recorder. Suppressing a heavy breath, Marcus pressed play. Elena's cold, emotionless voice rang out clearly in the dead of the night. "Dad, I wired the full $60,000 to Victor's account as agreed. Put Leo through the harshest program. The boy is a defective product, an insult to the perfection I'm building. If you and Victor can't break him down and rebuild him, I am never taking him back. As for Marcus, that fool will never know." The naked truth destroyed the last shred of denial in Marcus. His wife wasn't tricked. She was the architect of their son's hell, along with a man named Victor. "What the hell are you doing in my office?" A gruff voice boomed from behind. Arthur Sterling had woken up. The 65-year-old still maintained the burly physique of an ex-military man, holding a chrome-plated handgun, his eyes lined with fierce, bloodshot veins. "You think you can just waltz in here and ruin my educational program? You coward," Arthur sneered. "Your wife, my daughter, begged me to discipline that weak little thing you're raising. Kids today need to be crushed to become strong." Marcus didn't reply. His face was as cold as a glacier. Instead of raising his hands in surrender, his left hand violently swiped the desk lamp straight at Arthur's face, blinding him. In that exact fraction of a second, Marcus lunged forward with the speed of a panther. Bang! The bullet embedded itself into the ceiling as Marcus knocked Arthur's gun arm high into the air. Using CQC, close quarters combat, skills deeply ingrained in his blood, Marcus drove a devastating elbow straight into the old man's windpipe, choking him. Arthur's eyes rolled back. The gun dropped to the floor. Without stopping, Marcus spun and delivered a sweeping leg kick that sent Arthur crashing face first onto the wooden floorboards. Before the old man could groan, Marcus pinned his back, pulling zip ties from his belt. In just 3 seconds, Arthur's hands and feet were brutally hogtied behind him. Marcus stuffed a roll of medical gauze into the man's mouth to silence him. He stood up, looking down at the man who had tortured his son, writhing on the floor, his eyes completely devoid of mercy. He stuffed the hard drive, the files, the voice recorder, and Arthur's gun into his backpack. Tonight was only the beginning. Marcus pushed the door open and stepped back into the rain, heading toward the pickup truck where the 2 children were waiting. Elena and this demonic organization would pay for every single tear they had stolen from his son. The pediatric ER at the County General Hospital was bathed in dim fluorescent light at 3 in the morning. The smell of antiseptic couldn't mask the heavy, suffocating atmosphere. Leo lay in the hospital bed, swallowed by white blankets. An IV line ran into the back of his frail hand to restore his fluids and electrolytes. In the bed next to him, Mia had fallen asleep, though her hand still tightly gripped the torn fleece jacket like a protective talisman. Marcus sat slumped in the chair beside Leo's bed, his bloodshot eyes staring blankly at the circular bruises around his son's ankles. The doctor said Leo was mildly malnourished, had infected mosquito bites, and showed signs of hypothermia, but physically, he would recover. The most terrifying wound, however, lay where no scalpel or antibiotic could reach. A young female nurse rolled a medication cart into the room. She carefully changed Leo's IV bag. But as she turned around, her elbow accidentally clipped a stainless steel medical tray. Crash! The harsh clatter of metal violently echoed against the 4 silent walls. In a tenth of a second, Leo bolted upright as if electrocuted. His eyes widened in sheer horror, his pupils clouded with absolute panic. He cowered, pulled the blanket completely over his head, and curled into a tight ball in the corner of the bed. But what tore Marcus's heart to shreds was this: Leo didn't make a single sound. The boy bit his lower lip so hard that fresh blood seeped out, running down his chin. His tiny body shook violently, his chest heaving as he struggled to breathe, yet he absolutely refused to cry. He was physically torturing himself to hold the tears in, because in his fragile mind, the monster's rules still applied. If you cry, you get stripped naked and chained in the freezing rain. Leo, no, it's okay, buddy. Marcus rushed over, quickly pulling the blanket away. He cupped his son's sweat-drenched face with both hands, using his thumbs to gently pry the boy's teeth away from his bleeding lip. Look at me, Leo. Open your eyes and look at me. Grandpa isn't here. There are no chains. That sound is okay. Leo cracked his eyes open, his gaze fractured and desperate. I won't cry. Please don't tell Grandpa. I'll be good. Tears finally spilled from Marcus's eyes, hot and bitterly salty. The man who calmly navigated deadly cliffs, who had faced down wild bears in the deep woods, completely broke down before his son's agony. He pulled Leo tightly into his broad chest, stroking the boy's matted hair. Cry, son, please just cry. Marcus sobbed, his voice rough. When it hurts, you cry. When you're scared, you cry. Dad is here to protect you. No one, absolutely no one in this world, is ever allowed to stop you from crying again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't come home sooner. The dam broke, Leo wailed. The gut-wrenching sobs of a 9-year-old boy echoed down the hospital hallway. He clung tightly to Marcus's shirt, crying for 3 days and nights in chains, crying for the ultimate betrayal by his own mother. From the adjacent bed, Mia quietly stepped down. She didn't say a word, just walked over and placed her frail hand gently on Leo's shoulder, sharing a pain that required no words. Dawn was breaking. Marcus walked out to the waiting area in the hallway, leaving Leo and Mia in the care of the nurses. A woman in a black suit with sharp, assessing eyes was waiting for him. "Mr. Vance, I'm Special Agent Sarah Hayes, FBI. Local PD transferred this case to us after raiding Arthur Sterling's camp." Marcus sat down, sliding the hard drive and the voice recorder across the table. "Everything you need is in there. Client records, coerced contracts, and evidence of forged authorization." Agent Hayes nodded, her expression dead serious. "We've skimmed through it. Sterling Pathway doesn't just have one camp at the edge of the woods. They are a massive TTI, troubled teen industry, network, owning 7 similar facilities across 4 states. Parents pay tens of thousands of dollars to have these people break their children's spirits. My teams are conducting synchronized raids on all locations as we speak." Marcus clenched his jaw. "Where is Arthur Sterling?" "In custody at the county jail. He is facing a litany of charges: kidnapping, aggravated child abuse, false imprisonment." Hayes hesitated, pulling a financial file from her briefcase. "But there's something you need to brace yourself for, Mr. Vance." "It's my wife, Elena." Marcus cut in, his voice cold as ice. "I heard the recording. She forged my signature, wired the money to have them torture Leo. Where is she? Is she arrested?" Agent Hayes sighed, sliding a photograph toward Marcus. It was a security camera still from a gas station, showing Elena sitting in a black SUV. In the driver's seat was a burly, bald man with a long scar across his cheek. "This is Victor Cross, head of security for Sterling Pathway, former private military contractor. The scars and whip marks on those kids are mostly his handiwork," Sarah explained. "We tracked the money. The $60,000 your wife transferred didn't go into Arthur's company accounts. It went straight into an offshore bank account under Victor's name." The truth landed with the brutality of a physical blow. She was having an affair with him. For over a year, Hayes confirmed. Elena was never tricked or manipulated. She planned this all along. She wanted to get rid of you and Leo by dumping the boy in her father's camp, using that as an excuse to seize marital assets, embezzle funds, and run off with her lover. Marcus closed his eyes. The image of Elena, the woman who was always obsessed with perfection, wearing expensive perfume, smiling elegantly at dinner parties, was actually a cold-blooded monster to the core. Chapter 7. A declaration of war from hell, then arrest them. Marcus opened his eyes, his razor-sharp gaze locking onto Agent Hayes. "That's the problem." Hayes rubbed her forehead. "The moment you took down Arthur last night, their internal alarm system triggered. Victor Cross got the alert. Instead of fleeing immediately, he grabbed the 7 most difficult kids from the main camp in West Virginia before the FBI could breach. We suspect he's using them as hostages. Elena is with him. An ex-mercenary, a ruthless mother, and 7 innocent children in their hands." Right then, the phone in Marcus's jacket pocket vibrated. The caller ID was hidden. Instinct told him it was bad news. He looked at Sarah Hayes. She nodded, immediately pulling out a signal tracer and signaling him to answer. Marcus hit accept, turned on the speaker, and switched to video mode. On the screen, Elena's immaculately made-up face appeared, though her eyes betrayed sheer madness. Behind her was a dark, damp space, resembling an underground bunker. Faintly in the shadows, there was the clinking of chains and muffled, joke-back sobs. "Marcus, you look a little tired," Elena smirked, a smile Marcus hadn't seen in their 10 years of marriage. "Where are you, Elena? The game is over. Hand over the kids." Marcus's voice was terrifyingly calm. "Over? Oh no, darling. It's just beginning." Elena's voice sharpened. "You always loved playing the rescue hero. Did you think saving that defective piece of trash, Leo, was the end of it? You ruined my father's career. You ruined my plans. Now, listen closely." The camera shook as the phone was handed over. Victor Cross appeared. He panned the camera to a corner of the wall where 7 children huddled together, hands and feet bound tightly. One of them was Mia's older brother Marcus, recognized him instantly from the file photo. "You must be Vance." Victor grinned, baring his teeth. "Heard you just handed a hard drive over to the feds. Bad choice. I'm sending coordinates. I want you to meet me alone. You have 12 hours to retract all evidence, or I'm gonna start survival training these brats with live ammo. And trust me, they won't survive it as your kid did." The screen went black. Agent Hayes cursed under her breath. "We couldn't trace the signal. He's using an encrypted satellite connection. Mr. Vance, you absolutely cannot do what they say. This is a federal hostage situation. The FBI will handle this." Marcus didn't reply. He stood up, looking through the glass window of the hospital room, where Leo was resting his head on Mia's shoulder. Both children bore scars that could never be erased. The law had its protocols, but Marcus knew that dealing with a cold-blooded mercenary and a mother stripped of her humanity, the delays of protocol would be paid for in children's lives. He picked up his tactical backpack from the floor and slung it over his shoulder. This battle had crossed the boundaries of justice. This was a hunt, and the most dangerous predator out there was not Victor Cross. A makeshift FBI field office was rapidly set up in an empty hospital conference room. Radar screens, satellite maps, and the static crackle of radios filled the air. Agent Sarah Hayes hung up her phone, turning to Marcus with a tense expression. "The coordinates Victor sent lead to an abandoned coal mine deep in the Appalachians, West Virginia." Hayes pointed at the map. "Our hostage rescue team, HRT, has been deployed and is setting up a perimeter 2 miles out. But we have a massive problem. Recon reports that Victor has rigged C4 explosives around the holding area. He claims to be holding a dead man's switch, a detonator linked to his heart rate. If we shoot him, or if the FBI tries to breach, the whole mine goes up in flames." "They're stalling," Marcus analyzed coldly. "Victor is a mercenary. He has no intention of being a martyr. He's setting a trap to keep the FBI paralyzed, while he and Elena find a way out through the old underground tunnels and execute the kids to silence them. When HRT finally decides to move in, you'll only find corpses." "I understand your concern, Vance," Hayes said sternly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "But this is protocol. We have to negotiate to secure the hostages. You are a family member of a victim, and you are in an emotionally unstable state. My orders are for you to stay here. You are not permitted to leave the hospital. Am I clear?" Marcus didn't argue. He nodded slowly, his eyes hiding a storm of calculations. "I want to go check on my son for a minute." He walked into the hospital room. Leo was fast asleep under the effects of a sedative, his tiny hand tightly gripping the edge of the blanket. Mia sat in the chair next to him, her wide eyes looking up at Marcus. She pushed her brother's torn fleece jacket toward Marcus, a silent plea. Marcus dropped to one knee beside Mia, taking the jacket. He placed a hand on her hair, whispering softly, "I promise, Mia. I will bring your brother back. No one else has to get hurt." Marcus stood up, took off his smartwatch, and pulled out his cell phone, tossing them both onto the hospital bed. Anything the FBI could use to track him. He slung his tactical backpack over his shoulder and pulled his baseball cap down low. Using the evasion skills of a man who had spent years working in the deep woods, Marcus slipped out through the hospital's emergency exit, vanishing into the parking lot before a single agent even realized he was gone. FBI protocols might save ordinary hostages, but to deal with monsters devoid of humanity, like Victor and Elena, Marcus had to become a more ruthless hunter than they were. 3 hours later, Marcus's pickup came to a halt, carefully hidden beneath dense foliage, over 3 miles from the abandoned West Virginia mine. The rain had stopped, but a thick fog blanketed the entire valley, turning the forest into a desolate gray maze. From a vantage point on a cliff face, looking through infrared binoculars, Marcus could see the flashing flashlights of the FBI perimeter in the distance. They were pinned down at the main entrance of the valley, exactly as Victor had planned. Victor had rigged motion sensors and crude tripwires along the sole access road leading to the mine. The arrogance of an ex-military man made him believe that no one could slip through that defensive perimeter without alerting him. But Victor had misjudged his opponent. Marcus wasn't an assault trooper. He was a wilderness search and rescue expert. His job was to read the terrain, to find the paths that nature itself kept hidden. Instead of taking the trail, Marcus chose to rappel down a sheer, vertical cliff face on the backside of the mountain, a blind spot that both the FBI and Victor had ignored, assuming no human could scale that deadly, slippery rock in the pitch black. Fingers biting fiercely into the stone, Marcus inched his way down in total silence. Sweat drenched his forehead, but his mind was as cold and sharp as a blade. Every time he recalled Leo's bleeding lips or the whimpers of the kids on the video, the power within him surged violently. After an hour of battling the cliff of death, Marcus landed safely right behind the mine complex. A cracked, ancient concrete wall loomed before him. He found a rusted iron ventilation grate. He had studied the topographic blueprints of this very mine during a minor rescue operation years ago. Using bolt cutters and a bit of lubricant to silence any metallic screech, Marcus clipped the grate open. He slithered inside like a phantom, the darkness of the tunnel instantly swallowing him whole. The smell of mold gunpowder and fear filled his nose. Marcus moved along the tunnel wall, his finely tuned ears filtering every sound. Up ahead, a sickly yellow light spilled from a massive cavern that once served as a coal staging area. He pressed himself tightly against a concrete pillar, watching in secret. Inside, the 7 children were huddled together, tied securely to rusted water pipes. Every single face was bruised, sobbing silently. Nearby, Victor Cross was checking a duffel bag stuffed with cash and weapons, while Elena paced nervously, frequently glancing at her watch. "The FBI won't dare breach," Victor growled, tapping a remote detonator resting neatly in his palm. "We're leaving through secondary tunnel C. The C4 is rigged right under this iron floor grid. Once we're safe, I hit the button. These brats vanish along with all the evidence." Elena looked at the children, her eyes showing not a single trace of hesitation, only cold, callous cruelty. "Do it fast. I don't want to hear these weak things crying for another second." Marcus ground his teeth so hard his jawline bulged. The bomb wasn't a heart rate switch, as Victor had threatened the FBI. It was a standard radio frequency, RF, remote detonator, a psychological bluff to manipulate the police. The C4 charge was strapped tightly to the main load-bearing pillar, directly beneath the grated iron floor where the children sat. Victor and Elena were preparing to leave, offering innocent children up as sacrificial lambs. It was time for the hunter to reveal himself, but first, Marcus had to strip the beast of its fangs. He gently slipped down into the maintenance trench beneath the iron floor, heading straight for the explosives. Beneath the rusted iron grating, the space was claustrophobic, reeking of mud, engine grease, and stale urine. Marcus pressed himself flat, crawling forward on his elbows and the tips of his boots, just as he had crawled through narrow rock crevices to save trapped hikers. Sweat drenched his forehead, stinging his eyes, but he didn't dare blink. Directly above his head were the heavy thuds of Victor Cross's boots. His and Elena's voices echoed down clearly. Through the iron mesh, Marcus spotted the pale gray block of C4 plastered to the mine's main support pillar, directly below where the 7 kids were tied. A tiny red LED blinked from the RF receiver attached to the explosive. Victor hadn't wired a heart rate monitor, as he boasted to the FBI. This was a short-range, remote detonator, simple but lethal. Marcus carefully drew his survival knife, sliding out its integrated wire cutters. The hands that had bandaged hundreds of victims were now as steady as solid rock. He shined his low-intensity, red flashlight on the circuit board. 2 wires, one red, one blue, ran from the receiver into the blasting cap. If Victor pressed the button in his hand, a current would travel to the cap, and this entire area would be reduced to ash. Marcus took a deep breath. There was no time for hesitation. With one decisive, precise motion, the blades of his cutters snipped clean through the blue wire, connecting the antenna to the receiver, immediately wrapping the severed end in electrical tape to prevent a short circuit. The red lead on the receiver died. The heart of death had stopped beating. Marcus let out a silent breath. He crawled quietly to the spot directly beneath the children. Peering through the gap in the grate, he met the terrified eyes of a 12-year-old boy, a face that bore a striking resemblance to Mia. It was her brother. Marcus pressed a finger to his lips, signaling absolute silence. The boy's eyes widened, understanding instantly, and he gave a slight nod, gently nudging the kids next to him with his elbow to keep them quiet. Above, Victor zipped up the duffel bag full of cash. "Let's go." He jerked his chin at Elena. "Let me leave the FBI a little parting gift." Elena didn't spare the children a single glance. She turned on her heel and walked toward the pitch-black mouth of the tunnel. "You're not going anywhere, Elena." The deep, resonant, and chilling voice echoed across the cavern, sounding as though it had risen from the dead. Victor flinched violently, instantly sweeping his flashlight and aiming his gun toward the sound. From the dark corner, behind the rusted mining machinery, Marcus stepped out. He stood tall, unarmed, his arms hanging loosely at his sides, his gaze drilling into the guilty lovers. Elena took a step back, her face draining of color in sheer shock. "Marcus, how? How did you get in here?" "So you're the coward who handed the drive to the cops," Victor sneered, flashing his teeth. Though momentarily startled, the mercenary's arrogant nature quickly took over. He yanked Elena in front of him as a human shield, his right hand gripping the gun, his left holding the detonator high. "Where's the FBI? They send a civilian in to die." "The FBI is standing outside, terrified of your dead man's switch." Marcus walked forward casually, every slow step radiating an oppressive pressure. "But I'm not. I came to get my son, and I came to settle the score." "Stop right there," Victor roared, his thumb hovering over the red button. "You take one more step, and I'll blow this place to hell. You, me, your wife, and these little brats will be minced meat. You think I won't do it?" Marcus stopped, less than 3 meters from Victor. He looked straight into his enemy's eyes and smirked. It wasn't a smile, it was pure, unadulterated contempt. "You won't do it," Marcus said, his voice even but made of steel. "You pride yourself on being a warrior, but you're just a parasite. You beat defenseless kids to satisfy your toxic masculinity. You seduce a shallow woman to siphon her money, a coward, a narcissist, and a rat desperate to stay alive like you. You don't have the guts to commit suicide." Being stripped bare made Victor's face flush purple with rage. His pride was brutally trampled by a man he had always deemed a fool. "I don't need to kill myself. I'll kill you and walk out of here," Victor screamed maniacally. "Welcome to hell." He slammed his thumb down hard on the red button. Click. A dry click echoed in the cavern. Then silence. No explosion. No roaring flames. The air in the mine remained thick freezing and eerily quiet. Victor stood frozen. His pupils dilated in panic as he mashed the detonator repeatedly. Click, click, click. Looking for this, Marcus raised his left hand, a severed piece of blue wire dangling from his fingers. In the fraction of a second that Victor was paralyzed by shock, Marcus lunged like an apex predator. The speed and decisiveness honed by 12 years of climbing and facing wild beasts in the deep woods were completely unleashed. He violently swatted Victor's gun barrel toward the ceiling. Bang! The bullet embedded in the rock. Simultaneously, Marcus's right hand threw a devastating uppercut, carrying the entire wrath of a father, smashing straight into Victor's jaw. The crisp sound of shattering bone rang out. Victor stumbled, the detonator flying from his hand. He desperately tried to pull the combat knife from his hip to counterattack, but Marcus was faster. He grabbed Victor's knife-wielding arm, twisting it viciously behind his back in a brutal joint lock, slamming the man face first into the jagged rock floor. Marcus's knee pressed down hard on the back of Victor's neck, completely stripping the arrogant mercenary of any ability to resist. In less than 10 seconds, the villain was entirely subdued. Elena watched the whole scene unfold. Her legs trembled violently, losing their balance, and she collapsed to the ground. The perfect, haughty facade she wore every day had shattered, revealing a pathetic, selfish, and cowardly woman. "Marcus, Marcus, please," Elena crawled forward, tears streaming down and ruining her mascara, desperately trying to touch his pant leg. "He forced me. He threatened me. I'm Leo's mother, please." Marcus pulled out a plastic zip tie, viciously binding Victor's arms. He stood up straight, taking a step back to avoid Elena's touch, looking at her as if she were the most defiled piece of trash. "You were never Leo's mother," Marcus said, his voice hard and absolute. "A mother doesn't sell her child to the devil. The moment you signed that paper, you died to me." At that exact moment, deafening explosions rang out from the tunnel entrance. The FBI's HRT had breached the main ventilation shaft and stormed in, blinding flashlights crisscrossing the dark cavern. "FBI, drop your weapons. Hands on your head." Surrounded by dozens of gun barrels and blinding light, Marcus slowly raised his hands. He turned his head to look at the children, who were sobbing tears of joy, and met the eyes of Mia's brother, who was nodding in deep gratitude. An overwhelming sense of relief finally filled the father's chest. The nightmare was finally over. 6 months later, the courtroom at the federal courthouse was suffocatingly packed. Relatives of the victims, the press, and child rights activists were all in attendance. The dark TTI industry, operating under Sterling Pathway, had been fully exposed, sending shockwaves across America. Marcus sat in the front row in a crisp black suit, his face unusually calm. The judge slammed her gavel. Her ironclad voice rang out, delivering righteous punishment to those who used the guise of education to satisfy their cruelty. Arthur Sterling and Victor Cross, the defendants, ran a systemic criminal enterprise, kidnapping, extorting, and brutally abusing defenseless children. Your actions are an insult to humanity. The court sentences you both to life in prison, without the possibility of parole, to be served in a maximum security penitentiary. Arthur Sterling hung his head, his usual facade of false authority entirely crumbled. He looked a decade older, trembling and defeated. Victor Cross shot a look of pure hatred at Marcus, but Marcus didn't even blink. He looked right through Victor, treating him like worthless waste. The judge turned her gaze to the woman cowering in the defendant's stand. Elena Vance, as a mother, your actions of forging documents, conspiring to torture your own biological son, and using financial resources to cover up these crimes are unforgivable. The court sentences you to 30 years in federal prison. Furthermore, you are permanently stripped of all maternal rights and forbidden from any form of contact with the victim, Leo Vance. Upon hearing this, Elena collapsed. She wailed hysterically, her pathetic cries echoing throughout the courtroom. She whipped her head toward Marcus, her eyes begging for an ounce of pity. "Marcus, please. I'm Leo's mother. Don't let them do this to me." But Marcus simply stood up slowly. He turned his back on her and walked straight out the doors, leaving behind the desperate screams of a woman who had single-handedly destroyed her own life. Justice had been served. The dark past was officially buried. A late autumn afternoon in Vermont, thousands of miles away from those horrific memories. A cold breeze swept across the calm lake, carrying bright red maple leaves. Marcus was standing in the kitchen of a cozy little log cabin, making 2 mugs of hot cocoa. He had resigned from field mapping. Instead, the FBI had hired him as a tactical consultant, helping them locate and dismantle illegal TTI camps. He worked from home, and most importantly, he was with Leo every single day. Out on the porch, Leo was hunched over an easel. The boy had gained weight, his skin had a healthy rosy glow, and the scars on his ankles had faded. He was deeply engrossed in painting a flock of swallows flying south. Not far away, Buster, their golden retriever, was basking in the sun. Everything was perfect until... clatter. Leo stepped back, his elbow accidentally knocking over a plastic bucket of brush-cleaning water. The murky, mud-colored water spilled out, flooding the spotless hardwood floor. The bucket rolled away, hitting the railing with a sharp, clanking noise. The atmosphere suddenly froze. Acting on the reflex of a deeply scarred child, Leo's eyes widened. His breath hitched in his throat. His tiny fingers curled, tightly gripping the hem of his shirt. He began to tremble, his lips pressed tightly together, bracing himself for the screaming, the slaps, and the brutal punishment for his uselessness. He squeezed his eyes shut. From the kitchen, Marcus stepped out quickly upon hearing the noise. He saw the puddle of dirty water. He saw the rolling bucket. And he saw the absolute terror freezing his son in place. There was no yelling, not even a frustrated sigh. Marcus set the 2 mugs of cocoa down on the table and walked over gently. He dropped to one knee on the soaking wet floor, completely disregarding that his dress pants were getting ruined. He reached out, gently pressing his large, warm palm against Leo's tear-drenched cheek. "Oops, just a little puddle, buddy," Marcus said in a deep, warm voice, flashing a gentle smile. Leo slowly opened his eyes, looking at his dad in astonishment. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. Please don't punish me." "Punish you for what?" "For accidentally spilling some water." Marcus let out a soft laugh, using his thumb to wipe away a teardrop from Leo's cheek. "Leo, listen to me. Everyone in the world gets clumsy and spills things sometimes. I even dropped a whole pan of fried eggs on the floor once. It's okay, son. A dirty puddle of water doesn't make you a bad kid." Marcus stood up, grabbed a rag nearby, and handed a corner of it to Leo. "Come on, let's clean it up together. 30 seconds, and the floor will be shiny again." Leo looked at the rag, then up at his father's kind face. In that moment, something that had been fractured inside the little boy's soul truly mended. The fear of punishment, the obsession with his mother's sick perfection, the whip of his grandfather, all of it vanished like sea foam. Instead of taking the rag, Leo lunged forward, throwing his arms tightly around Marcus's neck. This time, the boy cried. It wasn't a cry of fear, it was a cry of release. The tears of a child who finally realized he was allowed to be a normal kid, allowed to make mistakes, and allowed to be loved. Marcus held his son tightly against his chest, rubbing the boy's small back. He knew the journey to healing was still long. He had also received word that Mia and her brother had been adopted by a wonderful family and were recovering beautifully. Looking out at the lake shimmering in the late afternoon sun, Marcus smiled. Evil men like Arthur and Victor always believed that violence and callousness were strength. But they were wrong. True masculinity, in its greatest and truest form, does not lie in the ability to endure pain or inflict it upon others. True strength lies in gentleness, in forgiveness, and in the ability to bend down and wipe away the tears of those we love. The cycle of trauma was officially broken. Tomorrow, the sun would shine again,